Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode. We will discuss on Chat GPT. It's a new technology. I think our audience has huge interest to know more about this technology. We have our world famous speaker, Professor David Smith and Professor Donald. First, I would like to give chance Professor David Smith.
Dr. Sharif, thank you so much for this. The program is one that has generated so much press and interest that I believe it's a word that many people have in their vocabulary now, that several months ago it was not there. Chat GPT is a package, it's a large language model really that was developed by OpenAI. And OpenAI has developed a number of artificial intelligence tools, many of them under open source, that have been used. And Chat GPT is a model that was developed for natural language processing, which can do tasks such as text generation, language translation, language understanding. And it is based on a GPT 3.5, which is one of their other products, which is GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, which is one of the largest and really most advanced language models currently available. For example, in my companies, I use GPT 3.5 in two of our companies as part of the AI tools that we use. But one of the key features of Chat GPT is its ability to generate human-like text responses to prompts. It really makes it useful in a wide range of applications, such as creating chat box for customer services, generating response to questions in online forums, or creating content for social media posts, and so many more. One of the interesting challenges is people are using Chat GPT to write articles for the press and media. They're using it to write papers for schools. And that is creating a lot of controversial right now. But I have played with it some for my own personal use too, and it's really fun. Is that it will write poems, it will do other things. I actually asked Chat GPT to help me write a song. And it has generated pretty good lyrics that I was surprised how good they were. But some of the other things, it can be used, like I said, for text generation. It can be used for language translation. I've tried it translating English to Spanish. I've used it translating English to Greek, and it does really pretty well. It also can be used to summarize large documents. And I've put several contracts through it and asked it to summarize, and it did a remarkably good job. And it also can be used to analyze the sentiments of a document, and it helps me understand the overall tone, the emotion. It can also be used to look at feedback, like in customer service, to give the agent to say, "Gee, this person's really angry," or different things, and give you that type of feedback. Now, GPT-3, which Chat GPT is a deep learning algorithm. And by deep learning, it really threads multiple places. And it is a type of a neural network that composes multiple layers of interconnected nodes. And each node is designed to process a specific aspect of input text, such as the meaning, the sentenic structure, the contractual, and others. And the GPT-3 learns on massive amounts of data, which is actually what has made Chat GPT model as active as it is it's used these large bodies of machine learning that GPT-3 does, which is the Chat GPT is built upon top. So it is overall of it. And so kind of just to finish the technical part at the high level is it's again based on GPT architecture with the deep learning algorithms, self-attention mechanisms that they call it, to generate human-like text response. And it works in multiple languages and things, but just to kind of get uh, into it, those are some of the basic functions. Oh, for the interim, Chat GPT is free to use, but you're going to see some premium models hit the market very soon, particularly with Microsoft making a very large investment in it. I think you will probably see Microsoft acquire the technology very shortly. So those are my initial comments.
Mr. Donald, can you unmute yourself? Mr. Donald, can you unmute yourself?
Great introduction as usual by David. I want to take his last comment. I was just noticing, hearing some people talk about how there's a whole group of people that are open source people like Linux that are madly taking all of these models and duplicating them with open source, so Microsoft can charge as much as they want, but there's a parallel effort to make all this stuff free. So I think that we'll see it widely available to everyone in the future, as long as in the future, because it's not, the technology isn't, it's not rocket science. It's pretty well known. The hard part is to get the data, and so that's the reason somebody like it's taken so long to do this, is because really what goes, the way it works is that they have to manually assign values to words, and then what they do is they go in and they don't, well, not manually anymore exactly, but what they do is they come up with features for words. So when you first think about trying to analyze word, you might be able to say, well, it's a noun, it's a verb, it's an adjective, so on like that. But that doesn't work very well, because lots of words can be both nouns and verbs. So like in English, almost any noun can become a verb. You can verb a noun whenever you want. And I just took the word verb, which is a noun, and then I used it as a verb in that sentence. And so what you have to do is you have to then ask the question, well, what is it? Where is it relative to the other words? And in our brains, we're doing kind of complicated things that don't just have to do with where the words are relative to each other. We're having, it's got something to do with the way we understand the world. So we can do things where we move things around in a sentence, like I put the book. I did the work for John. For John, I did the work. You can switch things around like that, and it changes the meaning it slightly in our brains. And so it's not just that the words are next to each other. There's other more complicated relations to each other. But the Chat GPT is just looking at whether the words are next to each other. and it's looking at the statistical statistical probability of how words are related to each other. And this works really well because they've got so many words. And what they do then is assign a probability to each word and its relation to each other's word and the probability that it's a noun or verb. And then they make up so many categories that there's literally 1 billion categories that a word can be in. And so what they do is then they go through all these words, like all the stuff that's on Google, all the libraries that Google has access to, all the discussions that people have had on Google that they've got access to, and they categorize everything. And that's the ability that they have to be able to come up with their language. The Chat GPT and other of these large language models. I mean, obviously, if it's Google's data, it's their large language model. And the way that they do translation isn't that they know anything about any meaning of what they're translating. For example, they just compare something that they know is translated. So the way that they learn to translate French is that in the French government took all of the parliament in the French government, and they translated everything that they ever did into both French and English, because they're both languages in Canada. They're both languages. So in Montreal, they speak French, and in the rest of Canada, they speak English. So all of the government business has been translated into both French and English. So what they did is they ran it through and they compared all the French to all the English, and that allowed them to create the ability that when you put in more French, you can look and you can say, well, is this French? What English is this French like? And they compare the two, and it gets really fairly good when you have enough stuff that you can do that with, and that's what they've done. And so you can see that the translations are much better in languages that there's a lot of stuff that's translated. They're pretty bad for Russian and some other languages where there's not a lot of stuff that's translated, and also languages that the way that the structure of their language is not as easy to do that, because in Russian word order is not as critical, and it changes the meaning in subtle ways, but it doesn't. You don't have to have fixed word order the way we do in English and French and things like that, and so it makes it a little bit more difficult. So the translations aren't as good. And where I'm going with this is that what it's doing is it's just looking at what has been. So it's basically it's looking at things that have been just taking the average of everything that's been written that it's ever been able to see and creating an average of everything. And that's what it does. So I sat down with Chat GPT and I asked it to write something in the style of Nabokov last night, and it was hysterical. It wrote, what was it? Something like, there was a woman in a village named Russia who was named Anastasia. And then it went on in this thing like a child. And, compare that to the opening line of Lolita, which was, light of my life, fire of my loins, my sin, my soul. One of the most brilliant opening lines in literature. And Nabokov is like, every sentence of Nabokov, you just sort of like, you can't believe that anybody could write something like that. And Chat GPT is just like a child wrote it. And I asked it to write an essay on abductive reasoning, and it read like a I understood where it got what it got, because there's a couple of meanings of abductive reasoning, and it got a kind of a like one of the meanings of it, and it wrote the essay in a very structured way. So it writes an introduction, a middle, and a conclusion, like you're supposed to write an essay, like I was taught in high school, and I started doing that yesterday because I just read an article in the New York Times, I think, about how people were using this to write essays, and it was fooling the teachers because these were so much better essays than the people usually wrote. And I'm like looking at these and going, well, these are like essays that high school students write. And I realized, I remember that when I was in college, I was a tutor, and I would look at the essays that college students would write, incoming college students, and they were so bad that I could see how something like Chat GPT could write something that that people was better than an incoming college student. But it's got a long way to go before it's. I just want people to know that it's got a long way to go. And one of the things that I've read that teachers are doing, which I think is a great idea, is to have people write essays by Chat GPT and then look at them and try and understand how they're different than an essay that is good and actually well written, and what's good about it and what could be better about it, and try and understand how you could use it to learn to write better. So it's pretty cool. It's an interesting tool. I wouldn't worry about it replacing humans anytime soon, but it's a fun toy to play with right now.
Eric.
Yeah, so we've had these kind of chat capabilities way back when they were dedicated programs, and they were quite entertaining. It's one of the things that the social media is built on. It's the idea that you talk and people respond to you and you feel heard. And so that's actually been around for a while and has been quite captivating. The difference is, how do you implement this technology? And so Chat GPT, one of the nice things about that is the ability to bring in, first of all, models. So, the models upgrade, it made it easier to distribute the models. The second part of that is data. So in the early chat bots and cases like that, it just went through a library of things that say when you said something. The difference here is you can easily deploy this. Right now, you can go to Telegram and you could start a World Talent Economy Forum Telegram group, and you could add right now for free the chat bot right in there, and all you have to do is say /ask. So we could say, give me the 3 top reasons that we should watch World Talent Economy Forum. And not only will it go out to the huge amounts of data and access high computing power, so again, accessibility, not only the models and the data, but the computing power, but it'll actually look what people have said in that chat and use that. So it could go through and look while anybody said anything good about the World Talent Economy Forum, and it could actually bring that in and use that as a conversation. So that's the amazing things is before the chatbot really didn't pay attention to what you said before, and it didn't really go with the conversation. It just took response, answer based on what was already in its training. But with this capability, it'll actually keep track of this. If we were putting this on transcript and putting it in there and we asked a question, it could actually as we were talking, look through those transcripts of what's going on in this stream today and add that to the conversation. And that makes it much more convincing and much more realistic. That being said, I don't know that I would hire this to do my work for me without checking. But I would say if you were going to go to Fiverr and hire somebody to do some research for you, it's a pretty good first guess on a lot of things. For example, Mike Koenigs, who has a podcast, I think it's Capability Amplifier, was talking about the fact that normally it takes him weeks to help people start a new business. He brands them, comes up with ideas. He did it in a day or two just by having it go out and get the raw materials. And not everything is good, but it does enough good stuff and things that you haven't thought of. It really is good at getting some things to look at. And of course, we are setting up the Center for Governance on the Alien Worlds Federation Planet of Ike, and of course the World Talent Economy Forum is setting up its office there. And I'm actually typing in that Ike Telegram form right there to help me set up the web page for this, because I'm asking questions. Why should we do this? And you can even say, write a statement about this. The biggest thing is I'm amazed how much the use has gone since they've released that and made it accessible. I've seen it all over the place and lots of people using it. So the question, though, is, you always look at the good that it can do. And then you say, what happens when students say, write my essay for me and do things like that, are you paying somebody to do it? And the other question is, so who owns the stuff it comes out with? They've just had a real battle with art. If you tell an AI, make all kinds of art like this, and it publishes the art, who owns the art? Can AIs own art? That's an interesting question of content. And by the way, I love the AI in art too. When we were setting up our Center for Governance, I said, well, let's set up our Center for Governance building. And I said, create a futuristic building on a grassy coastline. And all of a sudden, okay, there's our new building. So you should see the website coming up with that. And in that, I might put the World Talent Economy Forum office and say, build me an office, futuristic office, and it can do that. So I guess to me, those are the big things, is the speed at which you can update models and add data to it, and the fact that it uses current conversations and streams to actually be part of that data, the ease of implementation, that anybody can quickly integrate this in apps and even in chat streams is big. And the power of what people are already using it for, to ask very interesting questions, come up with a way that's there. So it's definitely, I think it's having an impact, and it's going to have a huge impact. And I don't think we've really thought through what the downside of this thing is. There's a lot of upsides that I think are really cool, but I don't think we've thought through all the downsides yet.
Thank you, Professor David.
Great comments from both Donald and Eric on this as we go. Like I said, I've been really enjoyed working with the GPT products since they've been introduced, and since this one was introduced 4 months ago, 5 months ago, and using and playing with it. I agree with what Eric has said, though, too, that Chat GPT could be used with the World Talent Economic Forum to create some very interesting elements. But then we also need to understand its limitations and stuff. Already, dozens of people around the internet have posted applications to allow teachers to check to see if a paper was written using Chat GPT. Also, multiple governments have put in place committees to analyze whether Chat GPT is going to add to fake information, deep fake information, and how to use it in that regards. Many political organizations are looking at how to use Chat GPT in elections and help influence elections with it. So it's a very interesting claimant. Also, you see that its impact is really dominating a lot of headlines. And as we've talked about the others, that OpenAI is developing a paid version. Microsoft is looking to incorporate Chat GPT into Bing, into Outlook, into Word, into PowerPoint. A lot of places have blocked access to the web versions of ChatGPT. For example, in the United States, the New York City Department of Education has blocked it totally there. So you're seeing some of that use.
Thank you, Professor.
And looking at it, going back to the New York thing, real interesting, is that you're seeing universities now beginning to block it too. But what's interesting is GPT, which is an open source company primarily, has received a tender offer that would value the company at $29 billion, which is making it potentially one of the most valuable U.S. startups according to Wall Street. But you know, you do not see them fit in it. So one other thing that we see there is that it has the ability to impact a broad range of applications, from apps to services to things that we use every day, and how to use it. We're seeing it begin to use it in healthcare. It's being used to help with early triage, to help route people in complex things. So you're seeing it used in tool. You're seeing Chat GPT be used as an office assistant and working on it. So you're seeing a lot of it. But Chat GPT wants to be a conversational system, and so it's working to go that way. Uh, the competitors, though, are very interesting. Google management, on their internal systems, they issued what they call a code red in response to ChatGPT's release, which has been reported by the New York Times. And teams within Google have been reassigned to work on AI tools to counter ChatGPT. And Google even has its own language model called Law MBA, which made headlines earlier, but it is a potential competitor at ChatGPT. And this was the one that got all the press earlier about whether it was sentient or not. And you're seeing those type of things come up, and there's already a number of internet pundits who are saying, is Chat GPT going too far? Is it too close to being able to simulate a real human being and to create things? And there's discussions going on. The content that Chat GPT's, can I file a patent with it? Can I trademark it? Is it original intellectual property, or is it just the result of machine learning and algorithms being applied to it? And does that create creation or not? So a lot of questions still need to be resolved on it. And by the same thing, I'm going back to one thing I mention often, there's still privacy concerns with it and others as it's taking all this learning. So again, a wide range of things, but the applications are pretty broad in what can be used there. So Sharif, I hope that's a good set of comments here. Donald, I think it's you.
Yeah, I think that's always wonderful. Your comments are always valuable, David. I just just quickly, I've been writing an article on the relationship between basically the this kind of an American view that is loosely neoconservatism, but it's rational choice rational choice thinking and evangelical Christianity, and the kind of weird way that the two have come together. So there's kind of a form of that people are using Christianity to justify things like anti-immigrant, anti-welfare, all kinds of things that that from an outsider that reads the New Testament, you read that Jesus says things like, help the poor, don't judge people, and all those kinds of things, and yet this particular form of Christianity seems to be exactly the opposite of that. And I've been trying to understand that and reading about that. And so I just asked Chat, and there's quite a few books on it, and I asked Chat GDP about it, and it gave me a very kind of wooden, very, very high level. I couldn't use it as a beginning to an article about it. So it's everything that I've been getting from it is very kind of wooden and very, very superficial. So I think the teachers that are having trouble with the essays are a little guilty themselves, because the stuff isn't deep, and it isn't at a level of thinking or vocabulary that's I don't know, that's I mean, it might be for a very low level, but it's not the kind. I don't think it would. It would be an article in The Economist or something like that. It doesn't. It's not that. It's not that level. It's probably maybe 8th grade level or something like that. But anyway, I one thing, the very first thing I did when I sat down with Chat GDP, and I asked it a challenge that's been around for AI for decades, which is what I said is, Mary helped Sally with her homework and she appreciated it. Did Sally appreciate Mary helping her with her homework? And it said, there's not enough information for me to be able to answer that. And so it's interesting that it can sort of reference what's been going on, but it doesn't have enough information about meaning and the world to be able to answer something that you could answer incredibly simply, because it doesn't really understand the world. It's just, as I said, understanding the features of words and the relationships of words. And that's one of the reasons that it's kind of wooden, because right now I can say it, and I'm talking about Chat GDP, but Chat GDP wouldn't be able to know that what it was referring to this far along in the conversation, because there's enough things that have happened and enough things that I've talked about, it'd be confused, and it wouldn't realize what it was. It wouldn't know, because it just can't do that. And so, I mean, it's interesting. So it's an interesting tool, and it's an interesting it's an interesting toy. I think it's it's cool. The reason I'm like kind of like saying what I'm saying and like kind of putting it down in a way is because there's a lot of talk about how AI is right at the verge of becoming super intelligent and being, being to the point that it's going to like that it actually understands language, and then before long it's going to do this and that and the other thing. But if you try to get these chat things to actually do anything for you when you have an actual problem, they can't. I mean, they're enormously frustrating because they don't really understand anything that you're asking them. They're better than just responding to a list of words, like Eric said, but they're not. They can't really. They can only respond to something that somebody's said in the past, or something that they've encountered in the past. So if it's something that's new and they have to try and figure out something that you're talking about that is not something that they've encountered before, they can't do it. They can't guess about what you're meaning. They can't like get into somebody's experience and guess about what it is that they're experiencing, which is something you do all the time in order to communicate with other people. It's called abductive reasoning, and computers can't do that at all. So they can be helpful, but I mean, the chatbots drive me nuts, and they don't help me at all, because I never call any of these places unless I've got a problem that, that's really, really difficult to figure out, and the chatbots never help me. So I can't stand them. It'll be a while. Anyway, that's what I have to say.
Mr. Eric.
Well, in marketing, we talk about the 5 whys, which is WHY. That basically says you don't really understand what's going on unless you can ask why at least 5 times. Like you say, why should we care about Chat GPT? It said, because it can give you ideas. Well, why is it important to get ideas? So that deep dive is where the real human value comes in, is really understanding things. So I would say that Chat GPT is good for the first why. It can start by getting some ideas, but it's not really good for the deep dive. For example, while David was talking, I said, what are 3 reasons, that's Chat GPT, what are 3 reasons that we should watch the World Talent Economy Forum live stream? And it said, 1, learn about the newest trends in global talent and how to apply them to your own business and industry. Okay, that's a good idea. I mean, sure, that's a reason. The second reason, it said, access exclusive interviews with leading experts in the talent field, discussion panels with C-level executives, interactive Q&A sessions, and more. Okay, so there's some good ideas in there too. And then the third reason, it said, is engage with over 200 senior HR and business leaders from 40 plus countries while getting the scoop on the best practices and strategies that you can put into practice in your own workplace. So I guess my point is that, there's some decent ideas in there that you could flesh out. So I think that's pretty good for a first why. There are probably other reasons and things in there, but it didn't do a bad job. And the key is it did it in seconds. So in seconds, it put some ideas out there to start with. So I think that's a good why. And I also asked it, write a mission statement for the Center for Governance, which is what we're starting in the metaverse. It said the Center for Governance is committed to advancing transparent, effective, and equitable governance systems at all levels of society to produce healthy democracy, peace and equality, and advance the global common good. We strive to empower individuals and organizations with the resources, knowledge, and insight needed for more just and sustainable societies. Again, there's some really good stuff in there that if you had to do research and try to compile on this own, that would take you a while. And the key is this was fast. I mean, I typed it in while Donald was talking. It just came back right away, and I'm just looking at it now. But the question that kind of David and Donald both brought up was this idea of, should we allow this in schools? So, you know, you can ask Chat GPT why it should be allowed in schools, you know, and it'll tell you, oh, communication, there's ideas of learning disabilities. Chat GPT would be potentially useful for people that, you know, things like text to speech and speech to text, things like that, and be able to balance the fact that you've got different disabilities. The other thing is giving that first way for personalized learning. So one of the big things is that we all learn differently. And if you look at this technology in terms of gathering things and presenting it to you, even if it doesn't know all those things great, it may provide an insight to say, oh, this would be a good thing for Sharif at this time, and this might be good for David. And, you know, David might like things written, and Donald might like diagrams, and, you know, Eric might like conversations. So in terms of learning, that may be another thing. And we talked about schools banning this, but at some point, we're going to have to learn to deal with this in work. So at some level of schooling, you know, you're going to have to learn to use AI. And so, for example, you know, let's say we want to market to all of our World Talent Economy Forum community. So we would say maybe we want to convince people that they should support or go to the Tesla conference. So we go out and say, write some base letters for all our community. And it goes out and finds reasons why each individual, them personally, should be interested in the Tesla conference. Now, would I want to send those out automatically? I don't think so. But they could probably make a rough template faster than I could, and probably more effective than if we outsourced it, you know, to people who you can do that to and pay cheaply. So I think, one, you know, that's a valuable thing, but we're going to need to teach people to do that at some, write new apps, integrate this capability in there. So I guess in summary, I agree with Donald. It's not really good for a deep dive, but it's definitely good for coming up with the first why. And in addition to that, we're going to have to learn how to deal with that, how to use that effectively. And I think the idea that it can give us individualized approaches to things, including marketing letters, could be a big plus.
Thank you. Professor David, what's your concluding remark for today's session?
Sharif, good topic, a timely topic. You often ask, how can what we're talking about be used in the developing world, developing nations? This is a product that can be used anywhere. It can be used by entrepreneurship, it can be used in universities, it can be used in existing businesses, and it can be used in government. And we're seeing that beginning to be used a lot more. So this technology, particularly since it's open source, it has a very low threshold, can be used in all the markets that we normally talk about. So very broad applicability for it. The other thing we know is that right now it's using the web-based version. On January the 17th, so today, OpenAI Twitter announced that the Chat GPT API will be coming soon, and that there is a wait list now being formed to be able to use the Chat GPT APIs. and that just got announced this morning. And I've already put my name on the list for that API list, so that is there. The other thing that is there, Sharif, is it's easy to use. I popped it up in the private chat, but if anyone who's listening wants to go use it, just go to a browser and type in chat, C-H-A-T, dot, then openai.com, and that will take you into the application. So it's chat, openai.com, and that will take you to the application. My suggestion to people is play with it. Ask it to write a poem. Ask it to write part of an email you're going to write. Have it do some things so that you can see it and see its strengths. And it's also going to, as Donald mentioned earlier, show you a lot of its weaknesses too. Elon Musk said last week that he believes Chat GPT goes too far, that it's AI beginning to move towards the end and is part of the AI fear he has. So for him to come out that strong against it this early, to see the investments that Microsoft is making in the company, to see, as Donald talked about, the other people going to take as much of the code as they can and the learning as they can and move it over to keep it open source, tells me that this is an application that many people should be using. So Sharif, I think that's my final comments, is that I enjoy this. The market cap of $29 billion for an open source company is, to quote the millennials I know, it's crazy to have that much value for an open source company. But it is one that is very timely, and Sharif, you always bring timely stuff to this table. So thank you so very much for letting me be part of it.
Thank you. Professor Donald, what's your concluding remarks?
I like what the others have brought up about the question about integrating it and its problems with schools. I think that it really doesn't need to be a problem with schools, because what it does is fairly superficial. So it's great to have ideas. I mean, it's easy to get writer's block. So, why not have it give you a superficial start on something? I mean, as some of the ideas that that it came up with, that Eric started with, yeah, those, you can get those ideas and think about it and say, well, how can I make this even better? I mean, that's a really good start. Let me think about how people would respond to that, because ultimately the Chat GPT doesn't have emotions, and Chat GPT doesn't visualize and understand how people will respond and feel and visualize what it says. And only humans can do that. Only humans have empathy to be able to be able to really understand. Like, if I said that to somebody, how would they feel? In fact, that gets to be a problem when you feed any language into these things. Sometimes they come up with stuff that's very inappropriate. They've had to deal with that early on. Some of these chat bots, if you feed in some of the discussions that happen on Twitter and Facebook, you can find things that are very inappropriate and wind up having them come up with stuff you really don't want anybody to say. Regardless, I think they could be a great teaching tool if you use it right. You could look at them, because they do, by the way that they're structured, is that they do structure essays in a way that if you're trying to write a certain type of essay, it's very good to have, an opening paragraph and then the body of the essay and then a concluding paragraph. And, it really is good. They always say, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. And it really makes, it's a lot of clarity. But as we've all said, they don't go into very much detail, and the language, it doesn't have the ability to really refer back to what's going on in an effective way. It doesn't have the ability to. It's called in linguistics anaphoric reference. It really can't do that. And so a person has the ability to take the simple template that Chat GPT comes up with, and then use that to expand and rewrite it into something that's better. And that might be something that teachers could do and use as a teaching exercise. And then, or another one would be to analyze it and figure out why why it's limited, and how it could be better, and what it's missing, and research it. Because I had to write a couple of essays, and in both of the essays, it was missing really key facts. It was missing whole pieces, huge pieces of that particular subject matter. It just didn't mention them. And so that would be another wonderful thing that you could do to use to have people research it and ask the question, is this really comprehensive? So you don't have to be afraid of it. It's something that you could really use for teaching purposes. So I think we just have to rethink how we do things, and not necessarily be afraid of it. Mm-hmm. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you. Mr. Eric, what's your concluding remarks?
Well, what I like best, of course, is the ability to go research things. And a lot of times when you research things, being a professor and marketing, I'm used to students writing things and companies writing things that really don't make much sense. They say, we're going to altruistically empower individuals to reach the next level performance in a collaborative environment. It doesn't mean anything. The nice thing is Chat GPT actually puts real concepts in logical frameworks. So that's a good thing. However, it does it in a very authoritative, confident manner. And you can have it look up stuff that doesn't even exist. Like, talk about, how Sharif's performance would improve with a beard, or if he used night vision goggles. It'll give you something, and it may be kind of logical, but it talks about it very authoritatively. And with misinformation being so rampant, like what Donald was talking about, is, apply the Bible to support, a point of view I want, whether the Bible is really that way or not. I worry about misinformation and people using it to come, because it'll make up names and places and things that didn't happen. It'll give you a story about somebody who doesn't exist doing something that can't happen or shouldn't happen. It doesn't know. So you have to watch it with a grain of salt. And I worry about people going, oh, this is a good idea. Next thing we have, Jewish space lasers and people putting stuff out like that and talking about it over, friends, news media, saying things that aren't true. So I think we have to watch it with a grain of salt. But it's easy to access, and it's a lot of fun to play with.
Thank you, Mr. Markley.
Glad to join this conversation. I've actually tried Chat GPT a couple of times recently, and all in that line. As a matter of fact, me and a friend were looking at doing some blog posts and decided to use that tool in order to get the blog post. And we were doing things around technology and around a number of other things. And when putting in the subject, it definitely gave an essay. I would say the essay might have been better than what we would have created on our own or all in that space. And I guess that's what one of the concerns is does it become so good that we don't need screenwriters, and we don't need directors, and we don't need folks that are out there doing the usual creative stuff if we allow the Chat GPT to be the be all end all. I can't think it can be a good tool, and it definitely added my own voice along with the Chat GPT voice that I was using, because I think that sometimes folks, like anything, they might lean too heavily on it. How often have we heard kids say that they don't really know the importance of education because they can find anything they want off of Google? While that might be true, it is also true that they need to do some critical thinking and some development of thought with the ideas that they are given. At least that's my philosophy and my thoughts. But a lot of folks have got to this habit of just kind of like Googling something, or using the YouTube University or a number of other universities and that standpoint. And I guess that's my one to fear around Chat GPT. Is it going to be such a tool that we don't use our own brains and our own mind in that way? So one of the things I would urge people to do is use it, understand what you're using it for, but also make sure that you are adding your own voice into it, and also not letting it dictate the voice, and even creating some false narratives, because there can be some people that are creating things in Chat GPT that could be even totally false and all in that space. So that's the other thing that can happen, is that folks can create a whole false narrative out there as well, using the chat and some of the other things that are in that space. But that's just on my immediate thoughts and immediate concerns. But I'm not going to lie, I've used it a couple of times. I will probably use it a couple of more times.
Thank you. This is excellent discussion. So hopefully we can discuss more about this topic. And thank you everyone for joining today's session. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.